As always, we are presented by Sea of Dead. Should have mentioned that in the beginning. Sea of Dead 403.ca. We got some new merch up now. Some stuff for pre-order, and hopefully that stuff's going to get here this week. We're hoping to be able to get that all boxed up and let you guys come and pick that up here before the Christmas season winds down. So seaofdead403.ca, get some great Calgary swag. It is now time for the fantasy football dumpster darlings. We begin at the quarterback position. So again, for those of you who are unfamiliar, it is the best performances from the least owned players. We put them together on a team and see how that team would have done. Cooper Rush, 8% owned, which is entirely too high, but 21.6 fantasy, 0.06 fantasy points. At the wide receiver spot, it is Rashod Bateman coming out of hibernation for a 21.5 point performance this week. Our wide receiver 2 is Jalen Coker, who apparently plays for the Carolina Panthers. He's 2% rostered, came up with 19 fantasy points, even with Bryce Young stinking up the joint last week. At running back, it is Ameer Abdullah, still in the league. Kind of. He plays for the Raiders. He is 16% rostered, came up with 16 fantasy points. Justice Hill is probably the most frequent player on this list. Every now and then, he just reminds you like, hey, by the way, I'm a really dynamic pass-catching running back. He's owned in 17% of leagues and picked up 15.3 fantasy points. At tight end, it's Bretton Strange, 2% rostered, 12.8 fantasy points, and our flex spot is Jalen McMillan, 8% rostered, 16 fantasy points. At the kicker spot, it is Will Richard, kicker for the Vikings, 9% rostered, 15 fantasy points. And the defense, they stepped up on Thursday night, making it just an ugly game. It's the Rams defense, 11% rostered against San Francisco, 12 fantasy points. This team, where Rashod Bateman is easily the highest owned player on the team, comes up with 148.76 fantasy points. Gross.